quite different from previously. Less desk space, more collaboration space, like different types of meeting rooms and meeting facilities and so on. Like just the basic thing of and really ensuring to be able to have hybrid meetings, to have a conference room, but to really get good engagement from people participating remotely in that side as well. Not having them jump in and out and like sound is cutting off and so on. Those things really have to work now.
This is super interesting because it means coming out or thinking about this when we are maybe coming out of COVID. Basically said, do we really need our office space? The normal desk?
Yeah.
No, then we will work at home. So what do we really need? And then could you summarize it in 2, 3, 4, 5 core bullets you were looking for? This is a good recipe, by the way, to think about. A collaboration space for sure, right?
Collaboration space, working space, like having like a quiet, nice area as well to really be able to focus, but also to really have social space as well. Because I mean, some people don't live with their family, they're single and stuff. They want to meet their colleagues. They want to have a community to work with and feel that they're making friends and like really have something, not just work, not just delivering on tasks, but something bigger, being part of a community and driving towards solving problems and so on.
And also have the coffee machine effect, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the big differences between the virtual meetings that you have today and the normal meetings you have otherwise, that you do normally meet outside the office when you meet physically, and you have these kind of small talk discussions, and you meet at the coffee machine, and you usually, I remember at least at the university days I had, these were really the most useful kind of times.
Yeah.
Where you could have this kind of discussions that wasn't really planned.
Yeah, and I think like even though we're trying to find we're trying to schedule some short calls to talk about nothing.
You do that?
Yeah,
So
we do that to some extent, but we're doing it with some.
We do too, actually.
Oh, really?
But I think we're not doing it enough, and it's not substituting those coffee machine, water cooler type.
Yeah.
Like when you stumble upon something, hey, what are you talking about over there? That sounds like something that connects to what I'm doing over here.
Yeah.
But it's so many angles here, because in one way, super interesting to think what is the future office space all about. And clearly, collaboration space is a no-brainer, but now you added social space, a coffee machine space, or whatever you want to call it. And I think this has also something to do with when we are pivoting from a more Tayloristic, siloed approach way of working. I mean, like we have driven efficiencies for years, right? Separation of tasks. And now all of a sudden we understand to become data and AI ready is a multidisciplinary exercise.
Yeah.
So we need to understand each other. And in the work we're doing with Airplane Alliance now, Aalborg University is doing a lot of research around multidisciplinary teams. And then a key word that comes up, where I think this now ties back together what type of space we need, is tacit knowledge. So it's like it's tacit. So we're talking about different types of knowledge. Or in order to do your job, you have your skills in terms of your experiences, and then basically you build up in a group, in a dynamic. You build up this informal knowledge, how the group works. That how does an agile team become fast? Why aren't they fast the first day, but they are fast after 1 year? It's because they built up an understanding and experience, a lingo. So it's a lot of knowledge, tacit knowledge, that is a little bit harder to touch, but it's clearly there, and it's this gelling mechanism we need. So then all of a sudden, I would argue that how do you get different disciplines who are not used to talk to each other to start meeting and building relationships?
Yeah.
This is the data engineer talking Python, and this is the domain expert, the surgeon, talking Latin.
Yeah.
We need a coffee machine so they can talk bullshit and find the new language.
Yeah. No, but actually, we're actually doing that kind of stuff inside the Combient network as well. Actually, just 2 weeks ago, I was moderating a session where we invited senior legal counsels from our group of 31 global corporates and innovation leaders. So and they were discussing together a discussion about how to overcome the legal challenges of collaborating with startups. Yeah. How do you manage your IP, commercial setups, and so on.
So we have many different skill sets.
Yeah.
So it's the corona is coming out of COVID and into the new office. It's not only about going back to a Tayloristic, siloed approach, but we at the same time, the digitalization has ramped up. So we need to also go back to something which is new normal. So I think it's a lot of things happening here at the same time.
Indeed, yeah.
Breaking the norm and doing first principle thinking in terms of office space.
First principle thinking on office space. I love it.
Well, cool. And Johan, you're actually moving into a new office, you said, right?
Yes,
and,
Monday morning.
Monday morning.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, I guess.
So have you
make that
packed?
happen.
Have you packed your bags? Are you ready to go?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I haven't been to my current office for like 3-4 months or so. So today was the first time I went and just packed a box with my stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's start off and introduce also Johan Harvard. And we're very pleased to have you here. We've met in a number of times in AI Agenda and I think a lot of other occasions as well. I think I've been to Combient as well a number of times. And you also have such an interesting background. So I think a lot of people will appreciate hearing from you of your thoughts about data and AI. But before we start with that, how would you describe yourself? Who is Johan Harvard?
Who am I? I like to solve problems problems of larger magnitude, basically, and I like to do so by bringing people together from different disciplines to work on problems together. I like to understand problems and really understand the moving parts that constitute a problem, and then try to form teams and activities that can really address that. And so over my career so far, I've been doing that for different purposes, different customers, and different users in different ways. And today I'm doing it in something called Combient,
yes,
which is a pretty cool thing. And in my previous jobs, I've been traveling the world, looking at how different countries are trying to boost innovation and digital transformation and use of AI and so on.
And before we move to Combient, perhaps we should just go through a bit about the different steps, because you have a number of interesting places you've been to, I think, as well.
Sure.
So if you start a bit from the beginning, where did you get started? I guess you had an education in more of, or what was the type of education you actually did have?
Yeah, actually, in high school, I studied mathematics and like programming, so a lot of computer science. So I was like the really typical computer nerd kind of guy that lived with my computer and my computer friends, and really thrived in that and found that really exciting. But then, being done with high school, a couple of friends said, "Hey, let's just go to university and study something for fun." So that became a first step into more of the social type and societal questions, where I went into economics, national economics, more business side, and political science, and not least statistics as well. So and then after I was supposed to just do like 1 or 2 semesters and then move into my real studies, and I applied to Chalmers and was accepted to do an engineering degree and computer science. But actually I turned that down in the end and decided that actually looking into more like social engineering and how can we like engineer away the societal challenges, that's actually even more interesting than just coding. So
you're cursing to me right now, but that's okay. That's okay.
I'm with you. But so basically, the engineering, nerd gone humaniora or going business, or is it more business or humaniora or more? When you say social engineering, I find that a really interesting view.
Yeah, no, but I think the challenges that individual companies and people and teams try to address, they're also part of bigger societal challenges. So I think it's really interesting to try and look at those like bigger picture challenges as well, and see how can we set up our society to be equipped to actually try and tackle these challenges. Business definitely. I think business is an essential part, really core to be able to tackle these challenges. And creating wealth for society and enabling good life for people and so on.
And just for people that don't understand what political science mean, I'm personally very interested in that field as well. Although it's sometimes a bit frustrating because you don't understand it. It's probably because I didn't take the education that you have. But how would you describe what political science is all about? But
it's really, at its core about how do we rig our society and set up our society to achieve certain goals. And depending on which ideology and political philosophy you have, you might want to end up in different solutions. But in the end, like you need political scientists and policymakers that can craft regulation and various initiatives to drive society in that direction.
Right.
So I was trained to become the kind of person that can craft policy basically in the end.
And we're going to speak a lot more about that today.
So that's why it's so exciting to have you here today.
Yeah. And
to have that
specifically about the new
today.
EU proposal and whatnot about EU regulation and things like that. So that's a really interesting part. But then, okay, you moved into industry and you worked for a number of companies, right? Can you just mention a couple of places you worked with?
Yeah, so one of the really forming places for me was a management consulting company that I worked for. It was actually the management consulting arm of a large engineering company called Ramboll, a Danish group of company. And that was a really good training ground for me to work with customers, a lot in the public sector actually, doing like quantitative evaluation and assessments of policy, but also working with the private sector to look into like strategy support and advisory in different roles there. So I think the consulting job was really useful as a newly graduate to understand the problems of the customer and how do we work to really address that and solve that, and also forming multidisciplinary teams to see that okay, I might be 25 years old, but I can actually be project manager with someone who's 50 years old and bring that together with a statistician over here and someone else over there, and together we're really addressing the problems of this customer and helping them move forward.
That's great.
And after that, you moved into also the more of the agency part of your career, right? Or what were the next steps?
Yeah, so also working with the Swedish Agency for Growth Policy Analysis. So
and that's Tillväxtverket in Swedish, right?
Tillväxtanalys, actually.
Tillväxtanalys.
So not the doers, but the analysts and the evaluators.
Is that part of Tillväxtverket, or is that part where Tillväxtanalys, where did that belong?
No, it's actually an independent agency.
It is called this?
Yeah, so they're tasked with evaluating public policy and look at, does it work? Was it actually well spent tax money on something that made a difference within the area of business, basically. Business policy, economic growth policy, innovation policy, policy to drive competitiveness in society. And my main areas there were around clean tech, digital transformation, venture capital, a lot about VC as well, looking into the VC market in Sweden and how that works.
So this is new knowledge for me. Like we have an agency called Tillväxtanalys. I didn't know that. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah, no, we have
so relevant, by the way.
Yeah, we have a couple of smaller agencies doing that in Sweden. So that was that, and then I moved into the Swedish government and government offices back in 2014.
And was it regeringskansliet from the start, or in different positions in the regeringskansliet, or is it different parts of the Swedish government worked in?
No, I worked in Näringsdepartementet all the time, since 2014. So Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation, and. So starting under the former Alliance government with Annie Lööf as the Minister of Business, and then as the government changed, it was Mikael Damberg who was Minister of Enterprise and Innovation, and then later on from 2018-19, Ibrahim Baylan. But obviously I worked with many different ministers, not just my main minister, but other ministers as well on like digital affairs and foreign policy, trade.
We need to park to how does it work? Maybe it has changed a little bit, but it would be nice to get an understanding for how does government work on operational level, so to speak. That would be very nice as a topic, actually.
Please. And can you describe a bit more, because you were also coordinating a bit of the AI efforts that we had in regeringskansliet or in the Näringsdepartement, etc. But can you just speak a bit more about how does the general wait with the AI part for now, but just how are these departments working in general, and how do they work as policymakers to come up with the best decisions they can?
Yeah. So it can come from different directions, but one key aspect is that the Swedish ministries are pretty small in terms of headcount compared to other countries, which means that individual people within the ministries, they have a lot of responsibility. They have a lot on their plate and are managing pretty large portfolios of questions. In the end, the topic of AI ended up on my desk, so I was responsible for coordinating that. But basically, the tasks that you have to solve and how you address that can come either from inside, like the government decides that they want to do something, we want to have an action on this area, and then you get it on your desk to try and see, okay, so these are my instructions, they want to achieve this. And then I can look into see, okay, what are the options? What is my policy-making toolbox that I can look into? And depending on how much time and resources I have, I can also go in and ask experts. So that was my preferred way of doing things. So, like calling up 5-10 people in this area. Hey, if you had this task, what would you do?
That's cool.
And see, well, how do we boost this thing? How do we improve competitiveness of Swedish medtech industry, or how do we improve cooperation between Swedish academia and industry and make sure that academic research is contributing to competitiveness and so on?
So what tools do you have in the toolbox, so to speak? So let's say that you now want to accelerate AI, for example.
Yeah.
What can you do? I mean, you have taxes, you have regulation. What can you do really to from a government point of view, try to, for example, accelerate AI?
Yeah, I mean, there's, in theory, there's many things you can do. You could have tax deductions for organizations that want to invest in AI. So you can find some kind of definition and say that similar to companies investing in wellness and healthcare for their employees, they can get a tax subsidy. You could do something like that as well. Then that would boost maybe AI across the board. However, that would have a lot of so-called dead weight. You would be throwing money at stuff that would be happening anyways. Which is a waste of taxpayers' money. So that's maybe too broad of an incentive to set up. But that's one kind of policy they can set up. Yeah. And they can have more targeted initiatives and saying that, we'll do a call through Vinnova that the best ideas around this area can get funding with X million Swedish crowns, and you can do a project.
And Vinnova is this innovation agency that is also funded by the government, right? Or how would you describe Vinnova?
Yeah, exactly. So the government has a number of more operational bodies set up that can do hands-on work, basically, in society to address certain challenges. So you have Vinnova, for instance, that is tasked with driving innovation in Sweden in different ways, and then you have the Swedish Agency for Economic Growth, Economic and Regional Growth, Tillväxtverket, which are promoting economic growth and regional development and a number of different things.
So you can in some way also control a bit what they should focus on, right? Or
no, definitely you can. They are tools of the government. Yeah. Their job is to actuate for the government, basically, and that is done in different ways. They have a long-standing assignment, like a short document saying that this is the basic purpose of this agency. This is what you're supposed to achieve. Then they get annual instructions, regleringsbrev, so that where you have a number of specific assignments for this year. That this year you should focus on this and this and this, and we'll measure you on these KPIs. But then you also have special government assignments that can come irrespectively during the year.
We want a white paper on this.
Yeah, please look into the AI market for us and see what are the bottlenecks and the strong points of Sweden, and we want to have a report done in half a year.
But we also in Sweden have a bit of a different law called, in Swedish, ministerstyre, and it's not allowed for ministers to actually do specific actions, right? And how you describe that? What is the limitations that, Näringsdepartementet, for example, can do and cannot do?
Yeah. So basically, the Swedish government is a bit special in one sense that it is a consensus government. So for instance, in Germany, the Minister of Economy, he can go and say, okay, I want this agency to do this, without conferring with the rest of the government, basically. Right. So And because of that, he can move faster and have things happening. But it can also create interesting conflicts where you have like government actually disagreeing on stuff and assigning agencies to do different things that are in conflict with each other. But in Sweden, we have the consensus government, so all decisions are made in consensus. So which that means that when my minister wanted to do something, he first had to get approval from all the other ministers, basically. And they all have veto rights and can come with change requests and so on. So that means that you cannot then, as a minister, go and run off and say to an agency, hey, you should be doing this and this, without first checking it formally with the rest of the government. And then also you cannot step in and say, I want you to fund this company.
Right.
Or I want you to do this with this individual, allow them asylum, or like to do stuff in that sense. You're giving instructions on how the agency should be operating overall, but not in specific individual cases.
So partly it's about the consensus part, and please correct me, I'm probably wrong here, but it's also about, you can give some kind of directions to the different agencies you have, but they then have some freedom at least to decide how to actually implement that, right?
Yeah, and basically that depends on how you write up the assignments. So for me, when I came from a background of also evaluating government policies previously, that was something that I was quite keen on. When I was giving assignments to Vinnova, I was very keen to provide flexibility where I saw that was where there was a lot of room for that. So I think here we can really use the expertise and the innovative capacity of Vinnova to find the best solution for this topic. But in other areas, I wanted to be really strict about this is really important. You cannot deviate from these instructions.
This is more like giving a frame, and this is more instruction.
Exactly, yeah. So
you have both those tools in relation to how you then frame the assignment as such.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. We could have a whole show just about how the government works.
And I think in the topic of making Sweden data and AI ready, to understand these mechanisms is part of the whole game.
Yeah.
Because and I think the more the whole industry like understands the whole chain of events, we can influence it in a better way. Because I truly think this is one of those topics where you truly need a lot of expertise that you can't expect anyone to have in policy making and at the same time be an AI coder, right? So the more the whole ecosystem understands each other, back to the social coffee machine discussion, the better it is.
I think you can also draw a lot of correlation to what happens now with Corona and Folkhälsomyndigheten, who is at least what I think given a lot of authority and freedom to decide, how they should really, implement the Swedish way, if you call it that, or approach to it, right? But still, I guess they do get directions, at least from the government, in this is what we think and believe. Or how would you describe it? Would you say that the Folkhälsomyndigheten has been given too much freedom here in how they think they should operate things, or is this a good way of handling crises like Corona?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a pretty tricky question, because, I mean, giving very detailed instructions, that might be useful in some cases, but then, like, as the situation changes, those instructions are obsolete, and then you have locked yourself into a corner and they cannot maneuver and change. So, like, the balance of having flexibility versus predictability and really being specific is a tough nut to crack there. And that's actually a thing that I've been thinking about for the European proposal on AI regulation as well. Like, we would like to have predictability and really know which things are allowed and which are not allowed. So we'll not have this huge gray area that might be allowed. We don't know. But then, obviously, if you have that really specific set of rules, then it's really rigid. And how does that work over time?
But this is also extremely interesting to understand authority in relation to who has the best information to make good decisions. And you all heard about Simon Sinek, right? Simon Sinek is the guy who wrote the book Start With Why. So he's, you can Google him and you can find him on YouTube. But his this is very American in one way, but it's a lot about what is changing now from Tayloristic leadership, like how many stripes you have on your shoulder, then you make decisions, to when we are getting into more of a circular economy, networked economy, or basically a very expert-oriented economy. You really need to know what you need to have conscious decisions on quite operational level. So he's also highlighting a lot of, how does this decision pyramid look like? Where basically this is agility going to servant leadership and ultimately pushing authority closer to information. So I remember when I was in Vattenfall, a tricky question, should we be more central in our decision making or more decentralized? And Magnus Hall, the CEO at that point in time, he put it brilliantly. We should make decisions where they are best made. A very stupid argument or discussion, but if you it's profound, right? So who has the best conscious information to make this decision? And then, you can sort that out. But it's quite different to say Tayloristic, everything should follow chain of command, right? So I think we go back to hälsovårdsmyndigheten. When you have such a need for information really on a daily basis, really tricky to take that away from the guys in the know-how, I think.
Yeah.
I think we've never seen as many professors or experts on morning news shows as we have in the last year, given the corona situation. I think it's a good thing, but it also has problems. If you have, even experts are disagreeing a lot, and sometimes someone needs to make a decision and be consequent.
That's the point.
Have a consistency in the way you execute things. So it's not a super simple thing or simple answer, at least not to me, at least, how you do that, right?
No, definitely, and I mean that goes for AI as well. Like you might have your experts, but they might be really deep in their domain and not really see how that links to other level, areas of expertise and know-how, and see how that can fit together and really make a difference.
But did you follow this? I mean, like I took a very private interest, not the hobby is the wrong word, to try to understand how does it work in different parts of the world. I lived several years in Australia, so I have good connections in Australia, and I know how the legal system works fairly well in Australia. And the societies are very different, right? The view of government is different. How we trust authorities is different. So it also means that one type of way of working on and making decisions and delegating decisions, or not even making laws but guidelines, would work in Sweden, would never work in some other countries. So, but have you contrasted? Have you followed? Because I took an interest in trying to understand the Swedish way, but a little bit deeper on what's the Australian way in this, and then the American way a little bit. So have you looked at that? I found that extremely interesting. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's huge cultural differences, and that the cultural differences and history impacts how the legal systems are shaped and framed, and like what you need to regulate and what you can steer with other ways. And now you see like the FCC in the US, they came up with a blog post about how algorithmic discrimination should be banned, something like that, and that basically is almost working like regulation, because they know that if FCC does a blog post on that, then things are getting real.
This is the way of hint, we are going here.
Yeah, exactly. But that's a far cry compared to like European approach and really like throwing down.
2 years work on the latest one.
Yeah.
Awesome. So many interesting stuff there.
Yes.
But should we move to Combient perhaps?
Yes.
And for people, if you just start, for people that don't know what Combient is, how would you describe it?
So Combient is a pretty unique setup that is today working with 31 Nordic global corporates, Nordic HQ'd corporates, with the intent of speeding up their digital transformation overall through collaboration and joint work. So we have a group of only non-competing companies. So for instance, we have Ericsson but not Nokia. Right. We have Scania but not AB Volvo, for instance. And that means that these companies, since we're in a non-competing group of companies, they can share a lot.
Right.
And they can share a lot about how they're approaching challenges. And that enables a lot of collaboration as well, since a lot of the digital challenges that they're facing, such as how to get value from AI and build an AI-ready organization, has a lot of similar challenges. Either if your name is Electrolux or if it's Scania, for instance, you have different products perhaps, but hiring talent, working with data, setting up these structures, working with pilots, scaling that into production across the globe, different legal systems, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of similarities there, and we are helping them to address that challenge in a number of different ways.
Yeah, it's like we've been saying a number of times, AI is a GPT, a general purpose technology, and I guess a lot of other things are, but I think especially AI is surprisingly general and spreads across different sectors like Electrolux and Ericsson and whatnot, right?
Yep, definitely. So Combient today has 80, almost 90 employees, I think. And we're serving a group of 770,000 employees in our total group of companies.
So has there been a conscious focus on the large enterprises?
Yes, indeed. And it actually started, Combient was formed 6 years ago. And as you might have heard, it was started by the Wallenberg family, basically, with a number of their companies where they had big holdings, where they saw that these companies are really awesome companies that have cutting-edge products on the market, getting high profit margins and so on, and really renowned for good quality and so on. However, they were also sharing something else in common, and that was that they were a bit slow at really adopting the digital opportunities. So how can we speed them up? How can we make sure that these companies will also be competitive in the future and not be overtaken by Chinese or US competitors? How can we speed them up? Well, we can boost basic research in the Nordics. We can form VASP, the Wallenberg Autonomous Systems and Software program that was formed.
And AI these days.
And AI these days, yeah, yes. With the AI addition, definitely. And in that time, also Combient was formed to be more of an operational boost for this group of companies.
So how was it founded? So what's the back? It was sprung out of VASP, or was it sprung separately to VASP?
Separately, yeah. So VASP is really on basic research and academic research, and Combient is a completely different approach to boost digital transformation and accelerate digital.
So out of Investor, say setting up VASP or Combient more or less?
Starting with Investor and the other Wallenberg owned companies, starting with 11 companies, but then has grown over time, and now we are a lot of companies that have no Wallenberg affiliation whatsoever. So I mean, there are many companies in the group that have nothing to do with that family. But the prerequisites are that new members, new companies in our network, they have to be non-competing with the old ones. So we can never have Nokia in the group as long as Ericsson is in. And they have to be able to contribute to their peers. So if you want to be part of this, there has to be a reciprocal sharing as well. You cannot just come and want to extract insights from the others. You have to contribute and share as well and work with the others.
And what are the services that Combient provides to these companies?
So the first one and the biggest one is really to have a platform for insight sharing. So we're gathering peers in different specific areas and allowing them to share how they're approaching specific challenges.
And how do you implement that? I mean, a platform, what do you mean? Do you have meetings? Do you actually write it down? Do you share documents? What do you do? Yeah,
all of that, basically. Okay. We have a lot of, it used to be face-to-face meetings, so gathering senior leaders in smart manufacturing, in advanced analytics and AI and data, in cybersecurity, in HR, upskilling, and so on, and gathering those peers that are inside a specific domain, and having them share on specific topics. Like how are you addressing upskilling, digital upskilling on a wide scale if you have 20, 30, 40,000 employees? Globally.
And I must say, you mentioned cybersecurity a number of times, and it's a personal interest of mine as well. Perhaps we can have that as a separate topic later. I'd love to hear more about that.
And is it only Swedish companies?
Swedish and Finnish companies so far. But I mean, the companies have presence all over the world.
Yeah, so global companies, but there has some sort of roots in the Nordics or Sweden and Finland.
Yeah, so far. Sharing like a cultural DNA or like a value-based approach, I guess is essential. But we're working with everything from like Chinese-based operations to Southeast Asia to Europe to the Americas and so on. So we're working across the globe.
Awesome. And if we move into more of your role there, how would you describe what the main role that you have is?
So I'm one of a couple of orchestrators, you could say, in Combient. So I have 3, 4, 5 colleagues that are doing the similar job as me, which is then to work with the companies to help them along this journey, to bring in experts where that is needed, and to see opportunities and see their problems and work on ways of addressing that. And that can be done with bringing in knowledge from other companies, saying that, okay, you have a challenge here in optimizing your supply chain. You have a lot of cost there and want to address that. Or you want to improve the way you can interact with ecosystems around the world and work with startups and have them develop solutions on your platform. How can you do that? Well, actually, some of these other companies have tried that and have learned from that, and we can bring it together. But then we also have based on requests from the companies, we built also more operational services. So we have a team of 40 almost 50 data scientists and data engineers, which obviously is a big part of Combient these days, where I'm working with the companies and with our team of data experts to help them solve that problem and accelerate their AI journey in that sense, to be able to get value from data and analytics.
So you could call it, you have a common, like a resource pool, if you call it that, of experts inside Combient that can be used for the different companies you're working with, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm working with everything then from CEOs and like group management in these companies down to more operational levels inside the divisions, inside specific teams as well, to help them move along in different ways.
Cool. And I know there are different departments inside Combient Mix, etc. What are these kind of separate departments?
So basically, Combient, we're really proud of being able to build support services. And the first question, though, is that we ask that when companies come to us and ask for help with something, we look outside and see, is there something else that can actually solve this already? But when the answer to the question is no, we can form a service inside Combient and build something jointly. And one of those services, for instance, is Combient Mix, that started from a couple of companies coming and saying that we cannot hire world-class data science talent, and when we manage to hire them, they leave to Spotify after a while. So can you help us with that? We need to get this talent to be able to move on. So Combient Mix was formed from that. It started out as a separate, or as a team inside Combient, but then as it grew, it became like a pretty big service, and it needed management of its own. So we put Combient Mix in a separate company, a majority owned by Combient, but can also be boosted by some of the Combient network companies with some extra equity, and is managed today by a gentleman named Ali Sarafi that worked in Spotify with you, I think, back in the days. So they're now a really interesting service that they have set up to really support the organizations in becoming more mature and really being able to work with AI and getting value from data and analytics in different ways. We're ranging from specific projects, but more and more working with really equipping the organizations of how to address and how to work with data and analytics to get value from it. So a lot of it these days is about how to rig and organize your company for it, how to train your staff as well, and do hands-on training and so on.
So interesting, and I'm eager to ask specific questions about projects, etc. But I know you may not be able to talk about specific projects, or do you have some example project that you could potentially speak about? That just make it really concrete. What Combient can help with in some way.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of projects are something that we've shared previously. There's, for instance, a project we've done for LKAB, so the large mining company up north in Sweden, which is also part of Combient, that had a problem then and came to us around. They had a shortage of geologists that can go into the tunnels of the mines and assess, is this iron ore or is it just regular rock? We helped them look at what kind of photography they had already, and how can you find a solution to actually maybe do some image analysis and look at images of the rock wall and see, is this something that we should send out the geologists to actually address.
So just take pictures with cameras and try to analyze that using AI, or what?
Pretty much, yeah. So having operators that are already down in the mine, already down there, and can just shoot photos and have some analytics on that to analyze, does this look like iron ore? Should we send a geologist down there to double check? So that's a simple thing. There's plenty of projects, obviously, to address the challenge of these companies. But another one that's public as well is the applied data analytics campus, applied AI campus that we've done for a couple of companies, and obviously Ericsson being the big one. And Ericsson, after working with providers across the world, came to us and said that, can you guys in Combient, can you help us do more applied AI training for our staff? They can't just run a MOOC online and expect people to be able to work tomorrow with AI and analytics projects. We need more hands-on training. Right. And since we've done that already with Scania and a couple of others, we together with Ericsson developed a service to be able to do that, which is basically a really hands-on training program for already then people that has some analytical skill already, so engineers and analysts and so on, to be able to equip them with more the machine learning type toolbox and get to know that type of toolbox, and that's been so amazing to see that they don't need so much theory. Coaching them, working with them on real projects and real data from their daily work has been able to equip them to really start going back to work and putting it to work, putting it in practice, getting value from.
And it's such an important problem, more upskilling kind of questions, and it's one thing what the universities does, which is super important, of course, and they're trying to move into providing more lifelong learning kind of courses and events as well, but it's kind of hard. And it was really hard, at Spotify as well, when we tried to find what is a good upskilling from data science point of view. And is it the situation you would say today, Johan, that you basically have to do it yourself and develop these kind of hands-on courses yourself to have sufficiently good, or do you think there are opportunities today to use universities or other private companies to try to do this kind of upskilling courses?
No, but there's plenty of good courses out there already that you can do on your spare time or part-time. But you can only come so far with theoretical studies and fictitious cases that you're doing with made-up data. But when you start applying it on your daily problems that you're addressing in your job as an engineer, then that's something else, and then you can really take that to take it to your daily work, and that's something else. And I think that's something that was missing from our perspective. That is really essential to be able to equip people to work with this.
But I would take it even one step further. I have several examples, both within Ericsson from previous life, but don't you also in the end, very soon, you have a generic knowledge of, trained to do things that you can be educated, but then very soon you get into a context. This is the context of the actual chosen selected tech stack in this organization, and this is actually how the process works in this company. So one of the most successful training exercises I've been around was actually many years back in a previous life, where Ericsson moved from their VPM and project-centric R&D to product model to product lifecycle management. So basically it was a major thing to certify, give a driver's license to anyone in the role of product management or product owner. And basically it's then a combination of theory, it's a combination of tools and how to work, but then ultimately, what we did for Ericsson was to basically put together, what's the ways of working training in product management. So I'm talking about, is it data citizen, data scientist generic, or do I need to take it one step further? What's the data citizen ways of working given this tech stack, given this process, given this budget frame?
Yeah, I think that's really important as well. And it's not enough to have people that are like aware of the data science toolbox and how you can.
This is good. I mean, like
it's a good, definitely good start.
From zero, this is step one.
Yeah.
But then to get speed and acceleration and get the whole machinery working.
Yeah.
There are some fundamental choices, right? Are we working open source? Are we working cloud? Are we working on-prem?
Yeah, sure.
But
I think there's a lot of other challenges as well,
more
business type challenges as well. That it doesn't matter what tech stack you have if you don't have demand and pull from the business. So we see many companies struggling where they're setting up advanced analytics center of excellence, and they're hiring like top talent, PhDs, and so on, and being able to attract them is great. Training some people around the organization. But if you don't have a way of working and organizing that and creating a pool in the organization where they want to find these solutions, want to make use of this expert talent, you're never going to succeed. So you have a lot of these POC factories coming up.
We are moving into either one or two or three major topics. So we know. It's
amazing how often we come to the same kind of topics.
But it's like so. Have we done the introduction so we can sort of go into a theme, or do we have more around Combient to finish it off? Because now we got into I want to talk more.
But perhaps one of your specialities, as far as I understand it, is a bit about how do we work with these kind of multinational, international companies.
So now we took a topic.
But it's still, part of Combient.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course.
So perhaps that, and then we can move into.
No, because I think we're moving into from Combient working with multinationals. But then I think a theme that I know you, Johan, is close to heart is the reflections of what it takes to drive data and AI readiness in a large multinational. So and then I think this is type of certification training I talked about in Ericsson. That's part of the game, right? So maybe I think we should slide into this topic. But
which one do you mean? Which one? Do you mean?
The multinational topic.
Okay.
But of course, maybe coming into that from, that's what your experience from in Combient. So let's take it. So the segue. The first question as a segue into this. So you are working with quite large enterprises, and from the Combient perspective, what is the first? What's the learnings or reflections? And we can start it from the Combient way, and then we can move into the whole what is success and all that.
Yeah, definitely. No. So the companies that we have in the network are really fascinating. They're experts in delivering their products, and I mean they've been working with incremental improvements for ages and are really good at fine tuning the product, and obviously also innovating and looking at how can we find the next generation of products out there to the customers. But now in the digital era, things are changing, obviously, and you can add a lot of software layers on top, and you can add like intelligent data-driven services in the AI family. So that's creating new challenges for them. So the old ways of working are not enough to be able to solve those challenges, to address those challenges properly. So they're facing these challenges, and a lot of the companies are engineering driven. So they are really set in their minds of how to drive projects. So when we work with them, we usually start with the senior management and executive management level, and they come to us and ask us, how can you help us to move this forward? It's going too slowly. How can we boost this and speed this up? And then it's really a matter of finding the bottlenecks, finding the thresholds, what is holding this organization back, and also working with early adopters that are willing to take a step forward. And in some organizations, that might be in the sales department, and in others, it might be in the R&D department. But they are really different, and they're really differently structured as well. With something that's quite interesting to us is how centralized versus decentralized they are as well. How much autonomy do you have on the local level or regional level, divisional level, versus the group headquarters and so on. So is the group level, are they developing services that are available to use? So are you going with Amazon, the Amazon stack and AWS, or is it Azure? And then you're like you can use that, or do you have to use that in a divisional level?
But if we try to understand differences between, let's say, national or smaller type of SMEs versus these kind of international companies. Or let's take Ericsson as an example. And some people may say that Ericsson is just a collection of a large number of small companies, and they work more or less separately. And it's probably not true, but that's one way that potentially you can organize these kind of large companies. How would you distinct or explain the differences between these kind of large companies? Are they really like separate small companies, or can they really collaborate and reuse knowledge and platforms and whatnot between each other?
Yeah, I guess the real value from being a large company comes from where you can get economies of scale. When you can develop something jointly, and then that can be shared across a group, so you don't have to invent the wheel in every small, medium-sized portion of the big company. So they have to be able to find that kind of value somehow. But it is a challenge, and many have grown through acquisitions. So they're buying companies here in Germany, in Sweden, in the US, and in South America, and a lot of that they have built data structures, built databases, and built services on top of that, and just throwing that out and exchanging it for something new because of a corporate policy can be hard. They're supporting their customers. They don't want to have like downtime in their customer services. So it can be really hard to get that kind of value from data if you have a lot of like these smaller, medium-sized companies is under an umbrella of a large corporation. So you have to be able to do that journey and move towards some more centralized services that can really be shared across a group to get the economies of scale, get the large volume of data, and be able to develop services and so on.
But how would you summarize, or in your mind, what would you say going and working with data and AI in the really multinational global settings? Where do you think there are some additional challenges that makes this way harder or more complex? What are they? And can we flip it? Are there actually opportunities to do stuff that if you are too small, it's really hard to do? So what's the pros and cons? So what are the distinguishing positive and challenges for them when you look at the big corporations to a large but medium size?
Yeah.
How do you see that?
I think that in a medium-sized or smaller company, it can be easier to just decide on a solution and go with that.
Decision speed,
yeah. But whereas if you have like many different regions, many different divisions with a lot of power, because they're serving really important customers, and they don't want to shift out their technology stack just to consolidate that to something else. So that can make things quite hard, because you have a lot of you don't want to fix something that ain't broke. I mean, if it's working, it's delivering value and revenue and profits, keep going with it.
So stakeholder management, decision speed becomes much more complex.
It is much more complex, definitely. But then on the flip side, the opportunities are huge.
If you get it right,
if you get it right, yeah, and just going from like no standardized data to some standardized data can just reap huge benefits.
Yeah, so the basic, if you get it right, the percentage is actually massive. And
I think as well, you don't have to get everything right.
No.
Just getting some things right can really improve your opportunities and your benefits from this.
And what is your experience of the 31 companies larger? The decentralized versus, how decentralized are the companies in Sweden, or how central steered are they? Because I think what is complex is also has something to do with the central versus decentralized, where the power is really lying.
Yeah.
And I have worked in several companies which I find quite decentralized, successfully decentralized, Vattenfall and Scania. So, but how do you see the average in the 31 peer group?
Yeah, I would say it ranges, like for many it ranges from decentralized to very decentralized.
From decentralized to very decentralized.
Yeah, so definitely many organizations are decentralized. So the decision powers are out there in the organization. But more and more realizing that to really be able to get the value from digital opportunities, we have to centralize something and agree on some standards. And by doing that, we can get values. But it's going to take some time. And should we really invest in all this boring infrastructure stuff? So it's really important to show the value that you can get in an early stage.
But I think this is super important to understand when we are looking at what the best of the best are saying, coming from America or from other cultures. My hypothesis is that Swedish management and decision and consensus style, all the way from government, has meant that we have, on average, more decentralized structures than the rest of the world. Do you think that's fair? So the Nordic management, the Nordic companies, or is this the general norm? Because I truly I don't recognize myself in some advice from large management consultants, because that's not the way it's done.
But I think definitely we're standing out in that sense. Sweden and Nordic style in that sense is more decentralized than other places, definitely, and that has served us really well. It has allowed a lot of development and innovation on a local level. Within my area of expertise, I can do things, and that is serving the customers super well. So I mean, it's served us very well over the decades.
Yeah, very interesting topic. And if we just try to, in some way, summarize it a bit, if someone is listening now and they think, I want some awesome advice from you.
Yeah, there are some people listening. Robert Luciani says hello.
Hey, Robert, nice to hear you, man.
And if they want to have, given your experience with working with these type of large corporations, can you give some short advices, tips and tricks, something that you really think, don't do this, but try to do this? What would that be if you just try to summarize it?
I think, in these days, it's quite easy to get buy-in from senior management. So make sure to get that, make sure the senior management is on board and is supporting and encouraging the organization to try this out.
So, for example, to do some more AI initiative or something? Do
AI and more data-driven initiatives, definitely. Yes. And then run small projects and test things out and to see what works. Expect to fail. Do not shut things down too quickly. Allow things to experience. Projects will fail. Yes. And that's the nature also of being more data-driven, that you don't really know what you're going to get out before trying. But putting these tools in the expert's hand, also like democratizing AI and working with front runners that want to try this out and want to experiment. So that might not be the lagging parts of organizations, more the leading ones, but work with them and see what can be done and evaluate and position your priorities, and then you can move on to also making more fundamental investments, because you will probably need to do more infrastructure investments on your data side to be able to get the bigger benefits, the big value and payoffs.
But that sounds great. That sounds fantastic. But let's be real, right? Because to do all that, don't we fundamentally then need to look very carefully at our steering, our governance, our fundamental funding and investment approaches? So if we are coming from a Tayloristic, efficiency culture, we don't fail. We know exactly what business case we're doing, and we need to nail every one. And here we need to have a much more lean startup approach and steering around this. And we need to have a different way of having metrics or something we never tried. So in the large enterprise, isn't it a lot around the governance and the steering and around innovation that actually goes completely against all the tips and tricks you gave, that basically means that you're working against the whole, cultural or the traditional steering of that company?
Yeah, sure. But I would say that basically all these companies have realized that now and are working towards that. So they're trying to carve out space to really do experimentations and so on. And then they're still struggling in many ways. They're doing pilots but not managing to scale it up and so on, because you have to run in sync in different parts of organizations.
And the pilot graveyard we talked about as an example.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's move into perhaps what some people think is boring, but I think is super exciting and very important, in nothing less, which is regulation. And we had this new proposal coming up from EU recently, and you've been instrumental, I think, in different ways there, also in guiding how the government should work in that, and probably have much more insights than most people have, and certainly more than me. And I have a lot of subjective opinions, how it's formulated, so it would be super fun to just discuss this a bit more. should we start by giving some kind of like very, very brief introduction to what that proposal is? Do you feel comfortable in trying to summarize a bit about what the proposal is about?
I can bring up some points, definitely. So there has been demand to regulate AI or the bad AI in the European Union for a couple of years, and there's been some really powerful leaders asking for that. So famously, Angela Merkel asked for a GDPR for AI. We need to curb bad, evil AI and make sure that we can protect the values of the European Union. So those were like the entry points into that, and then there's the European bureaucracy have been churning along, and now we have a proposal from the European Commission on the table.
Yes.
And what is it? Is it legislation? It's not just guidelines.
It's a legislation.
Proper legislation.
Proper, changing rules and laws, basically, so that's the core of it, and it's it's a proposal. 109 pages plus annexes. Plus annexes with definitions. So how do they define AI? Which is an interesting aspect just in itself.
Yeah, what do you think? I mean, the previous definition from the white paper and whatnot was questionable, if I use diplomatic terms. But I think it's better this time. Or what do you think regarding the definition of AI?
Well, it's better, but like we're really veering away from AI.
Yeah.
I mean, statistical approaches are included now. So anything that's statistical is also called AI in this regulation.
Yeah.
So
and
it's really
rule-based. So
rule-based, exactly. So it's any form of like algorithmic system or
so
like.
To me, it almost seemed to me, if I'm a little bit layman here, any forward-looking type systems, statistical, rule-based, AI, machine learning. So when you're trying to predict the future, recommend the future, regardless of methodology, almost seems to apply.
Yeah, but I think the previous one was worse, to be frank. This is certainly not perfect, but before it, I think anything that used data in some way, and code and software was AI, and that's horrible. But I think this is a little bit better.
But we are jumping straight into it. So just to frame the context, so it's a legislation.
Yeah.
And are there any major topics and points we can highlight on what the legislation is all about, how it's structured, before we go into what we think about it? Because this is going to be fun to talk about.
Yeah, but so basically they're really after like trying to curb bad AI. So AI systems are defined in 4 categories, ranging from totally prohibited, which is not allowed, should not be allowed on the European market.
Give an example.
Remote real-time biometric identification is like the big thing.
Example.
Yeah, and like influencing people's decision-making
manipulating
by manipulating like
social scoring
subconsciously.
And then we talked about social scoring as a no in Swedish or European.
Yeah, exactly.
But just to make it even more concrete, I mean, remote biometric identification is basically facial recognition in real time.
In real time,
right?
So if it's not in real time,
if it's not in real time, then it's okay.
Can be okay, yeah, definitely.
That's kind of strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
No, we can. You need to dig into this. I mean, like 101 pages. So I'm a little bit humbled.
So I think we have like around an hour, but we will not cover the entire hour on this. So can we go a little bit more lecture type on this topic, actually? So first, the definition of AI, the definition of the 5 categories that you said, and naming some examples, and then maybe opening a debate about what is left and what not, without actually jumping to steps. Can we do that? Yeah, a little bit like pedagogical.
Okay, so let's try it. I think we started with, so they have come up with a definition. Let's start there, which is fairly broad, and it has been mentioned in all the discussions that it's difficult to really nail it down.
Yeah.
But they opted to go for more broad than to, let's say, narrow, only machine learning or only deep learning. So it's more broad. That can be, as a summary, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it really applies across the board in that sense. And then starting with the prohibited stuff, that's a relatively small category. But then you have the big chunk, which is really the big challenge, which is high risk AI.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of definitions around like should you look at high risk AI, what could that be, and so on. That can be for like AI for recruitment purposes, AI for scoring in schools, educational systems, AI for migrational decisions, but it can also be related to AI in safety functions or components and systems that relate to safety, which could mean like anything in a cyber physical system, so anything interacting with people directly or indirectly could potentially be some kind of safety feature. So and that's, I think it's in the high risk category where you have the huge gray area, where it's going to be super difficult to understand. Will my AI be high risk? Might it be high? Do I have to get it certified by a third party body? And there might pop up new definitions over time. So that's a high risk category. Then you have the low risk or the really low risk.
So the high risk has a light orange and a dark orange. So it's like this is the gray area. So two categories which is the gray area, and then it's more or less the rest, which is limited risk.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and for instance, and then we go into the areas there, or the regulation. So the regulation is really about the high risk parts.
And I think to take a step back now, if we want to be pedagogical, what this means is that the proposal in the legislation has gone into this. We're looking at AI from a main definition of risk-based. Yes. So you can go into legislation in many different ways, and there was a lot of discussion moving into this, how to look at this, and the experts, I think, swayed the administrators to go risk based. So if we start before we go into what they have, the nuances is really tricky. But do we think risk based approach, is that a fundamentally good approach?
I think, that's also related to the question of flexibility versus predictability of a regulation. Like, do you want to have a system that you can just read the book and then you know what the rules are?
And why is that good?
That can be good because then you can make investment decisions, for instance, and
easier to plan for companies.
Easier to plan for a company. You know that this will be the rules for the next 5, 10, 15 years, and I can make my decisions based on that. However, the risk is that technology will outrun regulation. So there will be new things happening around over time. So maybe my regulation will be outdated when it hits the streets and so on. Okay. So having a more flexible approach, which is the approach they've gone for now, to have this high risk category, which is a risk-based approach, where definitions and use cases will be added over time. So we don't know now what will be part of this category.
That's the annex.
That's the annex, and that will be also over the life cycle, where there's a European Artificial Intelligence Board that is going to be formed, and they will provide new guidance to supervisory bodies across the European Union. And then we might get the interesting things whereas AI protection board in France might prohibit something, and a board in Sweden might not.
Okay, so broad definition, risk-based, 4 main categories. This is sort of outlining the fundamental law. Are there any other core components of the law beyond what I summarized now?
There's the penalties if you break the regulation, for instance. So if you put out this type of AI that is prohibited, you can get a fine. And also if you're breaking against the certification and pre-certification of your high-risk AI that might be allowed on the market, but you're not following the rules, you can get fines up to 30 million euros or 6% of your global annual turnover, whichever is higher. So the GDPR fines famously are up to 20 million euros or 4%. So this is 6% and 30. This might be a negotiation tactic, though, and might end up at 4% in the end. But it's massive amounts of money, definitely, that you could risk.
And then there's a couple of small parts to this, even if there are just 1 or 2 or 3 lines that wasn't part of GDPR. For instance, we're talking about explicitly within the legislation, which is quite unusual, that you're defining that we need regulatory sandboxes. Like to even put that into regulation, I think that is at least quite good.
Yeah, no, definitely. So policymakers have been talking about regulatory sandboxes for the last 10, 15 years, for instance, to allow self-driving cars on the streets in certain places to be able to develop this kind of self-driving systems, even though general regulation does not allow for computer-driven cars, for instance. You have to be a physical person to drive a car. So like in specific cities in the UK, you can try this out. So there's a regulatory sandbox, they call it. Or you can try medical services in a regulatory sandbox in Estonia, where it's allowed to do things that are not really actually legal, but there they can bend the rules a bit. And here they want to include that kind of thing as well on more of a European.
But how and what and when, very unclear and not specified.
Yeah, very unclear, and will probably really depend on the country as well.
Any else to set the context before we start having fun with it?
Before we start to get angry.
No, rip it up. No, because I think let's rip it up, but let's do it in as objective way we can.
What do you mean objective? This is after work.
No.
I'm kidding.
No.
Okay, good. I think that's a good summary. And for one, we have the definition of AI. It has questionable definitions. I think the improvement is that it actually says it's a list of techniques, and then try to list the techniques. It's based on different machine learning techniques, saying supervised and unsupervised reinforcement learning, but also rule-based and statistical approaches, which basically makes it include
everything.
A lot of things. No, not everything, but a lot.
What is not included? Come on.
I think a lot of things can be excluded.
But
if you have a mobile app, it doesn't have much of data statistics.
Sure.
So I think that there is improvement, and I think we have to be positive whenever we can when it comes to this kind of proposals. So in that sense, it's an improvement, but certainly it has even more room for improvement, I think. Yeah. And then the question of the risk-based approaches and trying to have different regulation based on the risk, right? Yeah. That's the core point. Yeah. My first core issue, at least, with this is that they try to still regulate techniques instead of applications.
But it's funny. They say they want to regulate application and use cases.
I know, but they don't.
Even if they say it, but then when you read it, it's technique.
So they say specifically, if we take one example here, let's take the manipulation of opinions, I think, was one of the unacceptable parts of it. And I think, please correct me, Johan, if I'm wrong, but this, for example, is Facebook trying to manipulate people's feeling in the news feed and things like that. Yeah. And they've done some bad experiments with that in the past. So I can partly agree with that. But then they say it's the one thing that is forbidden is to use AI. It's not forbidden to actually manipulate people's feelings. Yeah. So it's okay to use non-AI approaches to manipulate people's opinions. And we manipulate people's opinions all the time with every kind of advertisement you see wherever.
And what is nudging, what is hyper nudging, and what is manipulation, right?
Yeah. And just take one additional example. I think they mentioned chatbots a number of times, and I think they even put that into the minimal risk category.
Yeah, but they're confusing.
Which is an interesting example because chatbots can be thought to be. I would be more happy if they said recommender system or something, but they say chatbots, and chatbots can of course be used in very safe applications, but it can be certainly very, very dangerous to use them. For example, when recommending things when speaking to children, or if you have suicidal people and they speak to a chatbot and they do the wrong thing, it has catastrophic effects. So to simply, once again, define the risk based on the technique, chatbots, instead of the application is horrific. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, but I think they would say that they will be able to cover that when they list use cases that are high risk, where there's a connection to people's health and well-being. That would probably fall in the high-risk category, and they will have a long and growing list of high-risk applications, use cases.
But why do they then regulate the technique and not the application? I mean, isn't it the actual manipulation of children, or that is, independent of what technique you use to do that, it's still bad? And why did they try to regulate the technique instead of the application?
Because they're trying to regulate AI.
Yes.
So, and AI is like a family of technologies and techniques.
Well, do you think it's a good or bad thing? I mean, for me, it's very strange.
I think it's strange as well, and I think if I got this assignment on my table, do a regulatory package for AI, and you want to curb the bad type of AI, and it should be risk based after a lot of input. I mean, this would be something that I could come up with as well, and I think a challenge here will be that it looks all right on paper, but I think the biggest challenge will be the application of this regulation in practice. Where do you draw the line? How do you put this in practice? Where is the definitions going? And having oversight agencies that will go and take a look into this chatbot and see, hey, is this high risk or low risk?
So in one way, intentional again, and I want to actually give a tip. If people who are listening want a crash course or actually want to hear from the horse's mouth, a slide presentation, go to YouTube and check out a European approach to a regulation of artificial intelligence. This is the CEPS think tank presentation, and what they did very nicely, they used Lucifa Scioli. She's basically, when you look behind the power, she's the real orchestrator of she's the one that's been working day and night for the last 2 years on this.
Yeah.
And basically, she does a presentation in this YouTube, and this was released a couple of days ago, and literally one of the first presentations she's done as a PowerPoint slide on this. So if you don't want to read the 101 pages, have a look at what she's saying and her storytelling. And she's clearly stating that this is risk-based and this is use case-driven. So fundamentally, intention is sound, we say.
No question.
But then, when you look into the 101 pages,
I think it's 109, actually.
109, sorry, yeah. So then the tricky comes things. And then the real argument becomes, what? It's going to be an endless discussion. Am I in or out? Which level am I on? And what do I need to do now?
Speaking back to what you said, Johan, and I think you said a good thing, which is they try to find a good formulation for the proposal and the regulation, and that's super hard, of course. Yeah. But it's another thing about how the implementation will actually be executed in some way.
I think that's the problem.
And then perhaps that's the savior in some way. I'm at least hoping that if I'm trying to be optimistic here. And the question is what kind of leadway. I mean, you as a policymaker, you've been thinking about these kind of things, and of course they want to also promote innovation and make sure that Europe and European countries can really take advantage of data and AI in a good way.
Yeah.
But to me, even though they say that literally in the proposal, that one part is really to boost excellence in this, I see very few action points in trying to do that. I think they have the private and the public-private partnership kind of things and things like that. But when it comes to the regulation aspects, it doesn't say much. Or what's your view on this?
I mean, they hope, obviously, that they can create the Brussels effect, that similar to GDPR, create a global standard, be a front runner in trustworthy AI. So then all the people around the world will come to EU, because here you can really shape and do good AI, not just whatever AI. Yes. So that's obviously the intention. But I think no matter how you look at this will delay AI development in Europe, and because it will create more uncertainty for AI developers in Europe. So even if the dust settles and we get a nice long list listing 500 use cases with detailed descriptions about different ways of using AI, if it's high risk or not high risk, that's going to take many years.
Yeah, but this is super scary, right? Because in the one hand side, we state that we want to have AI innovation. It's good for we need it in order to face our problems. Yeah. We really need AI to face a lot of problems, but we need to do good. But if you state that, I think we need to put our money where our mouth is. So if we now put up a regulation for this, we need to have a huge package in terms of the operational execution, support, guiding, SME package for get AI ready.
Yeah.
Huge. It needs to be absolutely huge in order to educate at the same time. Because, I don't know, let's talk about the pink elephant. and
Short.
no, not so short. I'm sorry. We've talked about it so many times. We have the AI divide, and we have contrasted it, the tech giants. And why, how did GDPR, it has the intention to safeguard Europe and European citizens, even European interest. The problem that no one understood was that the tech giants have the trifecta of the full use case library internally of AI.
Yeah.
They have the tech stack that knows that they can turn knobs and be compliant. And they have the legal department that are bigger than the normal company, right?
Yeah.
So they have the trifecta that means that when you put GDPR, they can deal with it in a way that very few can. The same will happen here now, that we want this to sort of level the playing field. But for the first 4 or 5 years, if you don't put real measures as a support package for the normal companies, by default, by this trifecta of lawyers, tech stack, and use cases, they will have a first mover advantage from hell. And that's how it is. You can't get away from it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to be fair, like the companies I work with, the big global multinationals, they will also be capable to deal with this because they're used to working with compliance and having legal departments to step in. They can also take risk, and they can take calculated risks.
They don't have the use cases, but they have two out of 3.
Yeah, and they're working on the use cases as well. So they can work and say that, okay, maybe we have to kill a project later on because it's not compliant, but then we can afford to do that because we want to stay competitive in the future. But for the smaller companies, that's going to be hard, obviously.
Yeah, they need the support.
Yeah, so I guess the European Commission will argue and say that the compliance cost will actually not be that high. So hopefully this will not kill innovation. However, like if you would be uncompliant and fail, that could lead to huge fines. So we'll see about that. But then also to be, it's important to state that this is just a proposal. It's a proposal from one of the 3 main pillars of the European Union. So this is from the European Commission, and then we have the European Council of Ministers and Prime Ministers, and then we have the European Parliament. So the process now is expected to take 2 to 3 years of debate of this proposal. And there will be amendments and adjustments and changes and so on. There will be lobbyists trying to lobby and make changes in this. Human rights activists and like different perspectives will be fused into this.
So it's a 2-year process to go from first draft to pass the law. Roughly.
If it even will be passed, we don't know. We don't know. But I would say that I think there's a really high likelihood that this will be passed in this kind of form because there's a popular request for this kind of regulation, I think, among people that maybe don't know so much about AI, and it's pretty easy to sell as well. Do you want to curb bad AI? Make sure that AI is working for the good of people? Yes. No, you don't. You want to have killer robots on the street? Is that what you want? No.
I think that's a good point, actually, Johan. And it may sound like we're against any kind of regulation, and that's certainly not the case. And we need regulation, and good regulation is really, really good.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously, it's very easy to identify bad use cases of AI for autonomous weapons or whatnot. So and social scoring and all these kind of things. But the danger then, of course, is that it will hamper innovation. And that is something scary. And I think you actually said something really good, which is the legal uncertainty problem.
Yeah.
If they simply say this is a problem that this is the type of regulation we want to have, but they're not really clear what they mean, and companies then will be rather safe than sorry and say, I don't understand. I don't want to risk to lose like 6% of my turnover.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in Sweden in a number of cases. Right?
So I think that's the major problem, that it's not like you can argue that to follow this is not so hard. So if you know what you're doing, if you have a process for it, it won't cost so much money.
Yeah.
The lost opportunity will be better safe than sorry argument that will prevail. Yeah. It will prevail in a lot of investment decisions now.
Yeah.
Before this process becomes stable. That you basically, I mean, like in essence, to make this work, you need to have trustworthy, ethical AI by design.
Yeah.
So you need to think about your use case life cycle and understand how to bring this consideration in.
Which is good.
Which is really good, but it will take us a couple of years to figure that out.
Johan, do you have any thought about how can we circumvent the legal uncertainty problem? Small question.
Small question. Yeah, I mean, it is hard. I mean, because all this type of flexible regulation that is designed to be able to live with society and as technology develops and so on, it will by default contain a lot of uncertainty. So the law always has a degree of uncertainty, and this will have quite a substantial degree of uncertainty. So I mean, the opposite would be to be much more clear and to point out what is prohibited and what is not, and what would be fine, where you have to have so-called ex-ante assessments and really do like get pre-clearance before you can launch a service on the market, an AI-powered service. I mean that would reduce uncertainty.
I have a question. So who is going to approve that?
So there's going to be a European-wide thing, a board of experts and representatives from all the member states.
Yes.
But then it will be up to each member state to set up an oversight body.
Yes.
Okay.
So for instance, for GDPR, we have Datainspektionen,
Yes.
which has now been renamed into
Integritetsmyndigheten.
Yeah.
right.
Integration.
So either you give this new AI oversight assignment to Datainspektionen, and hopefully then you will have to give them a lot of money, because they need to hire a lot of experts to be able to understand AI and go into source code, look into algorithms, look into training data sets. And there will also be third-party bodies that can be licensed to also do this for them. So you can buy like a CE.
Startup idea.
So we're opening an AI audit company.
Yeah,
that is what we are doing today.
Airplane Alliance just added a new chapter to the community.
Yeah, and there's also already people talking about we need AI to audit
Exactly.
AI.
That's what's my comment as well.
That's good.
But
This is a huge business, actually. Which
It's a huge business.
We should look this from a positive view, positive point of view.
we can make money from
We should.
EU.
Yeah, exactly.
Santarin has already figured it out. They will be trustworthy AI guide
As a service.
wizard, the wizard.
No, but seriously, I think if we take Datainspektionen as we had before, now Integritetsmyndigheten, and they basically had to handle GDPR, and it was problematic. It was a lot of uncertainty, and it caused a lot of people to be safe than sorry. But I think the finance department in Sweden, I think, did something good, and you probably know more about this than I did. But they also had a lot of regulation when it comes to banks and whatnot. But they also provided a set of guidance, saying, if you do it in this way, here is a good use case or a set of good use cases. So if you do it this way, you will be safe. Wouldn't that be a good way for Integritetsmyndigheten to actually not only enforce and be an oversight committee, but actually be a service that helps Swedish companies?
Yeah, and actually there's been a lot of push from this and the previous government to try and make sure that these auditing and compliance agencies are not just checking that people or companies are complying, but also supporting more and advising more, and showing that this is how you do it. This is how you can be compliant, and not just striking down on the ones that are failing.
So this is what I meant with this package. So our the big difference what we like with Finansinspektionen is that they have a consultative guiding approach rather than we don't give you any help. You say yes or no.
These days they do. They didn't used to have that.
No, but so maybe not back in the day, but the last couple of years there's a clear distinction where Finansinspektionen is going, which I find really healthy as a role model.
It's already defined, but it's already defined area as well for so many years. The finance, right, and this is completely new area.
Yeah.
By the way, it's called Swedish Authority of Privacy Protection in UI.
Good.
But so now we know for the next time, right?
But here,
Thank you.
I want to test another one, Johan. Are you sure everything will end up on Integritetsmyndigheten? Because the way I understood it also is because we have now use cases. So you have critical application. So then all of a sudden we have, I want to use AI when I balance the energy grid. So all of a sudden you have mission critical use cases.
Yeah.
So I've also heard the discussion that this is not cut clear that it's one authority in Sweden. No. So you have like data protection, privacy, what is human rights, belongs here. But then you have high risk AI with a use case that is more about its use case application. Energy, health sector, it will go into the authorities that they need to add their scope. Have you understood that? Am I wrong?
No. So as I understand it, it is up to each member state of the European Union to figure this out, to have a proper procedures for this.
So theoretically, it can be spread out.
Yeah.
Or it can be centralized.
It can be Finansinspektionen.
But ultimately, it's a national matter.
Exactly, and that I mean, having that is good, because then we can make sure it makes sense in Sweden.
Yeah.
But then obviously it opens up for what we've seen in the GDPR side as well, where you have different interpretations in different countries.
Hallelujah.
So which makes it difficult to operate on a European level.
But let's try to close up this discussion a bit. And in short, I would like to hear Johan's thoughts about the proposal in general. Are you positive or negative about the implications from the proposal if it were passed in a similar form as it is today?
Well, yes and no would be my answer. I mean, this will definitely curb bad AI and foster more trustworthy AI, but it will do that at the cost of slowing down development of services that can help us address societal challenges.
Yeah.
And that will persist for a number of years, I think, that slowdown. So on the good side, we're not going to have bad AI running amok in recruitment processes and scoring in schools.
But could it, with the definition that it's only real-time face recognition that is potentially regulated, but other types is okay, do you see it potentially could not curb bad AI?
Yeah, obviously, and we'll see what happens during these negotiation periods. In the coming 2-3 years, where there's going to be many proposals coming up on how to improve this and how to change this. So there's already potential loopholes, and there might be even more loopholes down the road. But that's difficult to say right now.
But in general, are you more positive and negative about the proposal, if you were to say?
I mean, as a policy craftsman that have worked with the crafting policy previously, I think this is an impressive piece of work. Mm-hmm. So I think well done, given the
complexity,
given the challenge. Like if Ursula von der Leyen came to me and say, do this, I mean, this is if you want to do something, this is as far as you can get. But I think it has so many.
Do you know who is Lucilla?
She's a senior administrator in the DG Connect, what's it called? Département Général
so she's one of the main players actually as a craftsman in this.
She's definitely one of the main players, and when I was in the Swedish Government, I was in the working group that she headed to develop these AI regulations. So I've been working with her.
But because you were working on the earlier pieces, like the steps that was the stepping stone for where we are today. So what was your story and line and input into this? So if you start your AI journey, it's quite interesting. Yeah, no,
I think it started with a really negative view of AI, having this gut feeling that oh my God, this is bad. Look at Cambridge Analytica and all these bad things. We need to curb this. So there was really the knee-jerk reaction from senior policymakers. And
so this was when you were a policymaker, but you hadn't really got on your AI path yet. Is that fair?
Well, in some sense, yeah. No, but I think the proposal has matured a lot. So I think it's a lot better than it used to look like. So having this approach is definitely good. Although, I mean, it has so many challenges with these gray areas and these problems. So I think there's a lot of problems with this proposal as it is today.
But how was it? You worked on the first was a white paper in 2018, or how was it? What was the steps? Yeah,
there was the white paper that came out with a first proposal outlining what the European Commission was thinking. And then they gathered hundreds, even thousands of proposals from the European Union. Anyone could basically submit a suggestion on how to improve it. And I mean, it's come a long way since then. This is much more sensible. but it has so many challenges as well. Like just for instance, there's so many specific points you can pick up, like having unbiased data.
What is?
And data needs to be of sufficient quality.
What is?
Yeah, what is? And like how do we know that the data is of sufficient quality? What is the bar for sufficient quality? What is biased data? All data is biased because society is biased.
I mean, AI per definition needs biased data, otherwise it can't predict anything.
You have to find the patterns, exactly.
Yes.
And then what's so there's
cool. But in general, you would say, with assuming a good number of improvements to the proposal, that we have a good Swedish perhaps oversight with also some guidance and also still enabling innovation in a good way. Do you think you're more positive than negative?
I mean, for Swedish competitiveness, I am more negative than positive. I think this will slow down development. This will create more.
Let's talk truth. It will slow down.
It will slow down development, definitely. Yeah. And it might shift as well investments outside of Europe as well.
So maybe it's a good thing from a ethical point of view. But if you just want money and innovation, let's not kid anyone. It will slow down.
Yeah. Long term, it might be good to mature the whole system, but in the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years,
it could have a lot of negative.
Yeah.
But you, Anders, you have been talking quite a lot in Peltarion about this. What is your view? Positive or negative?
I think actually I was trying to be objective here, but I certainly agree with you.
You're very quiet actually for a person who has a lot of opinions on this.
I know.
So you need to lift up a bit.
No, but we have so many other topics as well. And I like to move
positive
into
or
some
negative, Anders? Just continue.
Oh, no, but I certainly agree with exactly what you said. I think the negative implications of this is stronger than the positive ones. And we need to make sure that we enable data and AI-driven acceleration for companies in Sweden and Europe. And if we don't provide solutions for the legal uncertainty, as you mentioned, it will be problematic. Yeah. But I think there are ways to circumvent it. But I don't see people talking about it sufficiently. But perhaps with what we're trying to say here, just have the Agency for Privacy and Protection or something, but to actually not only do the oversight, but also provide guidance and services in helping companies. Perhaps we can actually come out in a positive way.
And for me, this is going to be, the legislation is one thing, intention is good, execution is everything.
Yeah.
So for me, if you have started to be, objectively understand how much work has gone into this piece of work and how they are trying to weigh every word, it's an impossible task. It's more or less, how can you write this? If you can't even starting with defining AI, how can you legislate it? So it's a done deal that it can't be done properly from the beginning. So therefore, maybe it's not about the policy itself. It's going to be all about what do we do for execution, and then this can be great, or it can truly suck. So for me, you know what? I have challenges. I maybe I was more negative, but you know what? I'm typical problem with Europe. Intention is good, execution sucks. So that's where I put to this as well. That's what I learned from GDPR. And
I hope that from my end, I think that my only hope is that they don't suck enough with the follow up, and they have thought about the change management in the beginning of making this, because I think follow up is going to be a problem. Even now, GDPR, it's been 2018. It's 3 years. Yeah. No, still people do not know what is going on. The only thing that we got is a lot of cookies. I mean, I'm getting diabetes of all these cookies. It's like, I think there's more cookies that I have ever seen in my entire life. And then suddenly I get like more emails in my inbox than I have ever gotten before.
But for me,
the second point is we are starting bleeding talent already.
Yes.
And this talent actually wants to work with the cutting edge technologies.
Yeah.
So how are we going to do that if we are actually chasing people away? It's impossible. This is really, really. I hope that they realize that. I agree, and I think that it will be. So let's say you drive a car, and you drive on a red light. Are you going to be fine because you had like a Volvo and you drove right or crossed on red, or because you crossed on red?
Exactly. Application versus technique.
Exactly. So if they minimize these two application, and not without trying to define it, what is RPA, artificial intelligence, because even the scientists do not know what is this.
Yeah.
So take discussion out. Focus on the use case.
So I agree with you that this has a polishing, but I really, really hope that they will understand that the follow-up is everything. Otherwise, everybody will be in limbo, like we are right now with GDPR.
Yeah.
And nobody is actually utilizing any customer data, while Google and everybody else is actually utilizing it. And then we are talking about AI divide this every Thursday here.
But another angle. We are talking in the climate crisis, the Paris Agreement. Can you actually make an AI regulation that is not global? How can you do that? Why don't we need to have a global regulation? How can we regulate that from one part of the world, especially when the tech giants is somewhere else? I don't think it works.
Yeah, we don't have anybody to regulate globally. So I mean that's utopia. So
what do you mean? Elon Musk regulates everything. Okay.
No, but in reality, we did the Paris Agreement. We came around. So how do we do the Paris Agreement in climate change?
Well, there are global agreements that we should try to move towards trustworthy AI and so on.
Isn't that some of the core here, that in order for this actually to make any sense, that getting to that discussion is quite urgently is needed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Brussels and many of the European leaders from France and Germany, they're prepared to take a cut in competitiveness and maybe make sure that Europe is lagging behind even more of China and the US if we can secure the ethical aspects and trustworthiness of AI.
But speaking about global versus national, perhaps it's time to move into the next topic, which is the Swedish AI Agenda, and how we, at least, we can't control the world. We can't define the regulation in every part of all the world we have, but at least we have opportunities to influence what we do in Sweden. And you've been part, Johan, since the start of the AI Agenda. And perhaps we should start a bit about, just describing a bit, what is the Swedish AI Agenda?
So the Swedish AI Agenda is currently, it's administrated from RISE, Research Institute of Sweden, but it's basically a formation gathering key stakeholders from all over Swedish society that are interested in AI, as users, as developers, as regulators in different ways, as promoters of AI and so on, gathering them together and sharing and basically trying to identify what should Sweden be doing to advance application and use of AI to get more benefits from it in society.
Yeah, and help policymakers as yourself, at least in former years, right?
Definitely, yeah. Policymakers and but also like to showcase good examples. Everything is not about policymakers. The government cannot fix everything in our society. Right. Government is just setting rules and promoting some things. Individual companies, regions, public authorities, and so on, individuals can do a lot as well. Yeah. So by showcasing good examples from throughout society, a lot of good things can be achieved as well.
Helping society at large in some way.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
And it was, I started in, was it 2019, I think, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
And it was these kind of 5 groups or something, both from industry and from academia and public sector and what was it, society and something else, right? And they all had like 50 representatives in total, I think.
Yeah.
Trying to come to some kind of conclusion, how should we...
So, sorry, I missed it. Who's sponsoring the AI agenda? Where does it reside under?
It resides under RISE. RISE
yes, you said that.
They have a coordination role and are coordinating it basically. So, and actually, it stemmed from when I was working for the Swedish Government and the Ministry of Enterprise. One observation that we made was that the AI landscape of Sweden is not coordinated whatsoever. Back in 2017, 18. There were no organizations or consortia or anything that were gathering stakeholders from throughout society. So there was no one to talk to. There was no way to access many of these stakeholders at the same time. So we were reaching out to different stakeholders saying that you need to form yourself. You need to gather together to make sure that we're not just hearing scattered opinions from left and right, but gathering something more systematically to be able to...
But you were part of pushing that this actually happened and came together, but you were at this point in time in regeringskansliet.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And you pushed that we need to go in this direction. Did you influence it? Could you put an assignment on this, or how was it?
Well, that was not an assignment back in those days, but we were talking to the CEO, Rice, and others as well, to say that this is a problem. We cannot just talk to Rice, just talk to Vinnova, just talk to Ericsson, just talk to Peltarion. We need to be able to speak to many that are impacted or are developing AI and so on at the same time to get your joint input in different ways. So please try and work and address that challenge. Otherwise, it will be hard to really move things on the policy side as well, because anyone can write it off. That's just Peltarion saying that. They're like a special interest. That goes against what all the others are saying. But by gathering together many stakeholders from all parts of society, then it has much more credibility, and the government can say that, well, actually, this comes from throughout society, from the public side to the private side, research, and so on and so forth. Then it has much more weight.
Yeah, but it is about direction and focus. You have all this investment we can do, but if you want to get any bang for your buck, you kind of need to channel it.
Yeah.
So we worked for about a year there, and then we also have some deliveries, and we spoke in the Swedish Parliament, and we published a number of reports, websites, and whatnot. And now we also need to continue to deliver in some way. And we just had a meeting actually today, I think, or was it yesterday?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Yeah.
Were you both there?
Yeah.
Nice.
And we were planning a bit, the future of AI agenda and how we can continue to deliver on it. And I think this is a typical example of the prototype graveyard thing. We had a prototype. We delivered like 25 proposals, like action points, saying these are, the thing that we actually were coming to some consensus about, in saying if we do this, it could have a positive impact on the Swedish society, right? But I think that was kind of an interesting moment where someone said, "Oh, we're done. We have the proposals now. There's nothing left." And it's such a classical comment. I think whoever said, I don't know who said it, but that's like an AI data scientist saying, "We have a POC.
I have the
it's
model.
done." Yeah,
I'm proud of my model.
Yeah.
Where's the money? Show me the money.
But I guess it's easier to point at the problems than to actually work at solving them.
Yeah.
We need to find a solution for upskilling of people that are in the labor market already. We can't just work with the people studying in university. That's just like one or something % being added to labor force every year. We need to work with the total labor force. How do we solve that problem? Yeah. Well, that one individual actor cannot do that, for instance. Yeah.
I think that's so good that we actually do collaborate so much. And I think one of what you said, basically, one of the big problems we have in Sweden, even though it's a small country, it's still very fragmented. And we have so many different initiatives being taken to try to digitalize and be more data and AI driven. But if we don't coordinate the efforts, it will not have anywhere close the impact it could have if we do coordinate much more, right? And I think in that aspect, this is super important. But we need to continue, I think, the efforts as well, right?
Yeah. But let me put some fuel on the fire. Get some heat in this debate or discussion. So I come from a practitioner's point of view, or change management point of view. Throughout my career, what I'm working on, strategy is interesting. Implementing and execution is much more fun. And then you go you go from the why to the what, and you end up in the how. How do I organize? How do I do it? How do I code it? How do I, from a societal, engineering point of view, how do I need to orchestrate this as a company, as an enterprise, all the way down. What I have a problem with a lot of the reports, and I'm full respect. It's really great pieces of work coming out of DIG, coming out of this. For me, it's the typical management report, staying on the strategy and the what and the why, and then very, very fluffy. It would be my normal way of talking. in terms of concreteness on how. So what and this is how I work at Scania, right? Great idea. My journey typically start by picking apart the first level and then reconstructing it. How do we get this done? How do we deliver, right? And I find a lot of the work we are doing now is lacking on the how and the concrete planning and the real investment. It's policy, ideas, recommendations, but
I disagree.
Okay.
Yeah,
please.
I think there's a lot of prototyping going on actually in society. It's on prototyping scale, so it's not moving the needle in society currently. But there's a lot of prototyping going on. So I mean, there's a handful of universities in Sweden doing shorter, more focused courses for working professionals, and pushing that out into society, getting people working in companies to go back to university, take a course, a couple of weeks, and to learn data science and applied AI in different ways. So pushing the limits of what can be done in the academic system. They're still stuck in the system, so they're really limited in what they can do and how they can scale that. But they are piloting it, they are testing it, they're doing it. There's projects in municipalities pushing the limits of what they can do with automated systems, RPAs and like AI solutions and so on.
Are we in the pilot phase? Are we stuck in the pilot graveyard risk? Have we really moved the needle? Have we changed the fundamental governance?
We have not changed the system.
No.
So we're stuck in small pilots, and like Vinnova is doing some really great work as well. Like fund your first AI project.
Fantastic,
a small
really good.
company
So
can
very
try
positive.
things out, test things out, but scaling is lacking. So it's not moving. It's not moving the needle.
So to take my I'm doing it to get an argument. I love it. Thank you. But it's like we're doing good things, but it's sort of going. Okay, so what's next? So what is the systemic changes needed?
Yeah.
What is the fundamental financial governing? It's like it's a little bit like nice to have. It's like I work in a big corporation and we have our innovation hub over here and we sit in beanbags and have fun and we do cool pilots, but I haven't really touched the core P&L. I haven't really touched the core decisions of the company. This is what I see going on.
Yeah.
So we are doing great stuff, but we are sitting in the beanbags in the innovation clown house.
Yeah. So like moving from just doing pilots to actually changing your way of working is being achieved in some bigger companies. And when senior management really sees that, okay, we need to take this step, we need to engage with the business and make sure that it's not just pilot, but it's solving real problems for real customers out there. It is happening.
It is happening on company level.
But it's going very slowly in society.
But I would really then, to be sure fair, that is happening on company level because the company has come through this.
Yeah.
But as a society, as Sweden, to support this and Sweden making a stance, I'm not talking about Scania or Vattenfall. I mean, this is a spectrum. They are doing it. Sweden supporting this. Sweden going out of pilot innovation beanbag mode to let's change the system. Let's look at the public sector and then we can get started there.
But that's, I think, it's one thing about the prototype graveyard, which is dangerous and something we should really fight. But it's, I think, a different dimension when it comes to fragmentation. Yeah. And all the different initiatives we're taking and lack of understanding, what are they doing in that part of Sweden or in this type of organization in academia or in industry, etc. And I think for this specific reason, the AI agenda has done amazingly good work. And I'd like to do a shout out to Jeanette Nielsen as well, who has been coordinating this, because she had more or less the impossible task of trying to, bring strong-headed people from academia and industry and people like myself in trying to make them all come to some consensus and agree on here's a set of recommended action points that we want to take. Yeah. I never thought that would work. Yeah, but I must say. So,
but
I think that's really
I want to show my humbleness that is we are starting from somewhere, and then you need to take the first step to get from fragmentation to something together, and then you need to do the forming and storming. You need to test and try and learn, and this is all great parts of the journey. But I'm eager to see how do we take the next step. I think that has been good, and we have taken that path. Yeah. But now we need to gear to the next gear. What is the next gear after piloting. I think that's what I'm looking for.
But piloting is a different thing. Let's try to separate the different problems. I think piloting and building prototypes and trying to get out of the prototype graveyard is important, but a different problem.
Okay, fair enough.
So fragmentation and trying to simply we are such a small country in Sweden, and we do have some really big corporations. We have some really awesome startups, and we have a level of digitalization that is superior, I would say, to most other countries. And if we simply can work a bit more closely together, I think we have an opportunity to really be coming out in a really, really positive way.
But for me, I love what you are saying. It's really positive. But what is it? What is the next step here? What is the next secret ingredient in the sauce that we need to focus on right now? Because it's a little bit
but isn't it obvious?
I don't think it's obvious. I think it's hard.
I think it's obvious if you see it, because like every single thing, it will come to its path. So you have done this so many times in your
the business side, yes.
Yeah, in the business, in everything. So you have enlightenment, what it is, exploration. You want to try it and etc. It's like self-driving vehicles. Now it's available. We need to regulate the roads and etc. So we need to have this time to distill what is happening right now. So I think it will come, because organizations, if you see in the Nordic, they are not. We are saying they are very low mature. They are very low mature when it comes to going to production, but it's coming.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that we have moved on from the pioneering
so we have moved
station.
away from
so
in the last 5 years.
People know the processes. People know that they have problem with data quality. People know that they have like a problem with how to solve like organization and talent and everything else. Now it's about like the vision, the regulation, scaling
I think there's a really intrinsic key challenge as well between the private sector and the public sector that makes it difficult to go from the POCs to the scaling in the public sector, because in the private sector you can in the end you can have a senior decision making taking the uncomfortable decision and saying that I know this will be bad for you because you want to keep working on your thing, but now we're shifting to this. And that's an uncomfortable decision, but they have the power in the end to take that decision because they're answering to the shareholders in the end. But in the public sphere, when you have policymakers, it's difficult to step on those toes because they will shout and you will be having difficulties with getting re-elected and so on. And like having bad press is bad in politics, so it's difficult for them to take those uncomfortable decisions, changing how Swedish universities are run, for instance. That is hard. Everybody agrees that it has to be done to promote more lifelong learning and learning throughout your career and so on, tapping into that knowledge that is in university. But getting that out there, changing the rules for how they operate, that is uncomfortable.
Yeah, all change ultimately is not real change if it does. I mean, like it hurts in order to. It's like training a muscle, right? You go to the gym and you have träningsvärk, you have hurting muscle, then you're growing, you're building muscle. So I think that's the truth.
In closing for the AI agenda, any thoughts you have, Johan, about how can we make sure that the ideas and the action points we have as big impact as possible? Any thoughts, what we need to do there to make it happen?
I think it's essential that we think about how everybody can contribute to realizing these action points. It's not just one entity that are supposed to realize this thing. There has to be many initiatives, but they can be coordinated. So we can allow many solutions to blossom, but keeping it coordinating and keeping them talking to each other, I think is important. Not because otherwise we will have people waiting for others to solve the problem.
Yes.
So upskilling will be solved by someone else, and working on this solution over here, someone else will do that. And waiting for regulation, waiting for someone else. I think it's important to make sure that we are encouraging solutions across the board.
Assigning ownership, you take this challenge and we take this one, and together we solve, the whole thing.
Yeah, indeed.
I think that sounds awesome. Awesome. Should we move to another topic, perhaps? And we have so many of them, and I'm struggling a bit to find which one is most interesting here. I think potentially we have already spoken so much about the AI divide. I don't think we need to move there anymore.
I think we covered that
indirectly.
indirectly.
Yes. And I think we've spoken a lot about, the challenges that especially big corporations have, and we don't need to move there. So let me ask you then, Johan, you can choose between two of them, which one you prefer to speak about. One could be more speaking about the pandemic and how that will impact the economy, and if we can use data and AI in some way to have some kind of symbiotic effect in trying to make sure that we come out post-corona in a good way. Or it can be also more philosophical thinking. There will be a point when we have a singularity, when data and AI, or AI in general, will perhaps be out of control, and that could have some potential negative or positive impact on our society. If you were to choose between these two, which one? I know what you're going to say, but which one would you like to speak about?
Good question. I mean, on the second topic, I would say that what I'm seeing as solutions out there is far away from singularity. It's
far away.
Yeah. And like the public idea of what AI is, and now like when the AI definition includes statistical solutions, I think that's a bit indicative.
It's indicative.
That's a very good point.
Like what we're actually talking about is like regression.
Don't worry about singularity.
Statistical regression. Yeah, it's like so.
Regression is still
it's still considered AI. So
keep in mind that now we have new EU Regulative framework for AI, so singularity is not possible.
Could be.
Could come from China, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah, or Russia. Okay, but the pandemic then, and we have seen, it being influencing so many different parts of our society, of course, from a medical point of view, but also from an economical, from a psychological point of view and societal point of view, and so many different aspects of it. But if we focus perhaps a bit. The medical is hard to say. I mean, I'm not a medical expert. Your parents are, and perhaps you are as well.
But this is something else.
But if we focus perhaps on the more economic aspects of it, and we of course want to basically reboot the economy in some way, and this is actually what we try to do with data and AI in many ways. So saying, if you want to have your company being part of an AI-driven future, what do you need to do to reboot yourself into that?
Reinvent yourself to be relevant.
And I think this is a situation where we potentially can have a symbiotic effect of, you need to reboot because you had a horrible year. Perhaps you can also take the chance to also move in a direction that is more sustainable when it comes to also compete from a more global point of view. Or what's your thinking when it comes to pandemic and the economical impact it will have?
Yeah, I think in one sense, everything is up in the air. So things are changing, and the organizations are seizing the moment when they see the customers are more open to finding new solutions. To instead of having service technicians coming out and doing service on a machine, you want to do it remotely, and like that whole shift and that mindset shift in the customer can open up for doing more software driven and data driven services and so on. So many things are changing, and then obviously many things are still the same as well. And like we humans go the easiest path. So like anytime we can just go back to how we used to do it, that can be a simple thing to bounce back to. But I think like sufficiently many things have changed and will remain remain changed. I think post pandemic, and like the business travel, obviously how companies now are meeting more than ever. So like having all these virtual meetings has enabled them to have more cross-functional meetings, having less time traveling to meetings and just like wasted time in a sense. So more high quality meetings can be achieved in that sense, getting more.
So there are positive effects that we can see in this way.
Definitely, yeah. So it's opening up for collaboration across the globe, across time zones, across disciplines, and so on. So many things are more possible in that sense. But then not all of those possibilities are being realized, obviously. So. And many are stuck within their old systems and still have to deliver on the same metrics, and so we don't have so much change in there. But within the areas where you have metrics that are really promoting that kind of more flexible behavior to solve the customer's needs, I think it's pretty fascinating to see how people are stepping up in those areas.
And I think we've seen like a leapfrogging in terms of digitalization and certainly like education and how they've been forced to just move every course they have online. And it's not been an easy ride, of course, but they've been forced to do it when you're really pushed against the wall to do something. You can do more things than you perhaps realize in some way. And just take the academic sector and all the academic conferences that we have, and every one of them is moving online, and suddenly you can join the top AI conference that usually costs like many thousands of crowns to even register for free.
Yeah.
And it actually opens up for having a much more open scientific community which spreads the knowledge in a way it hasn't been possible before. So even though, of course, it has a lot of negative, impact, there are some positive ones, right? And it's been forcing us to digitalize. And if you digitalize stuff, or digitize stuff, and not only digitalize stuff, then perhaps we can start to actually use AI even more in the future.
But I have a question.
Yeah, okay, you go first.
Okay, so I love this. I have one part of this show.
Because Gordon has to be digitalizing a lot as well.
Yes, so I can tell you those people that the event organizers that lowered the prices from 4,000 euros to zero, that was a no pricing plan from the beginning, so that was a wrong thing to do. But I have a question. I read the article today on Forbes about, is it time to automate CEOs? Okay, good. Hear this. This is very smart. So, and you actually stumble over that because you said the decision making is done where it's nearer to. No, it's done where the information lies. So the person actually who has the most access to information and data will be the person who actually can decide. So who is the best person or a thing to decide when there is enough data and information? So therefore, the analogy, do we actually need a CEO, right?
Servant leadership. We need it.
And I like that. So okay, so it's good. So the question is, can we automate governments and politicians?
No, because data never tells the whole story, and not everything can be measured in the end. So there needs to be values that guide decisions as well, because there's always a lot of uncertainty. Even if you have all the data in the world, there will be uncertainty, and there will be predictions that don't work because people are not logical. We're not just rational machines that act in a coherent manner.
And I would add it to that, AI is good at some things, but people are good at other things. And AI is certainly really bad at the things that humans are good at, which is background knowledge and general reasoning that AI is so far away from having. But no human could ever go through the amount of data that an AI system can do. Mm-hmm. So I think by combining the two and having a government that actually is more data driven, amazing. That could be a imagine having a data-driven government in the future.
We didn't go there, but there is a really fun meta discussion when you put the AI EU regulation on governmental work. Put it back. So flipping the whole regulation. If we could improve the regulation itself, if we could improve the way we do regulation itself. So it's a little bit of a meta philosophical.
We just asked GPT-3 to produce all the regulation in the future, and everything will be solved, right?
Yeah. I read about that, and the thing that they tried in where was it? In Microsoft? No, in the early they tried in the early medical. So basically, they produced some kind of a chatbot. And the chatbot basically said to a person, it was just a line I feel very depressed, should I kill myself? And then says
this is the old original 50s.
It was really, really nice article as well. Good.
Awesome. The time is up, and as usual, great to have you here. But Johan, what's next in your life, personally, professionally? What's happening coming months?
Coming months, so a lot of things going on. A lot of our companies are stepping up on working to apply AI, so a lot of cool things professionally and Combient and the network. It's really cool to see how companies are maturing and wanting just to push the envelope and really move the needle in their industries. And what else? Personally, we actually had a third kid in January.
So congratulations!
Thank you very much. So after summer, I'll be going on paternity leave for some time.
That's nice.
So it's going to be nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anyone that you would recommend to be on this podcast? Someone that you would actually like to listen to be interrogated by us two?
One that comes to mind is your former colleague Ali Sarafi, who's heading up the Combient Mix, who's more first-hand and more on the technical side, seeing AI application throughout the network. So that's an interesting bit. And then I guess could be some actually first-hand regulators as well, from the European side or from the Swedish side as well. Someone from Vinnova perhaps could be interesting as well, how they're pushing the...
Johan, I have a request. Why don't you help me? You have some fantastic companies that you're working on a daily basis. So it would be very fantastic to get the CXO perspective on AI. Try to talk about why it is really challenging. I'm really humbled to be on this, the Scania side or the Vattenfall side. So if you would help us find some good names here, that would be fantastic. If you're doing some great work, that would be fantastic. I think for the listeners to get an inside track of the CEO perspective.
Sure.
If you can help us with this.
Yeah, I can give it a try. Maybe they won't have 2 hours to spare.
No. We will work
2 hours 30, no problem.
2:30.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
10 minutes is okay. We'll do it like that.
Thank you very much, Johan, for this amazing discussion. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I think also you're very good in communicating in a very pedagogical way, which I really appreciate a lot. And looking forward to a lot of future collaboration as well. So thank you very much for this time, and let's have some more beers.
Let's have some more beers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.